Hello, I have perfected Fran Bow on Steam by collecting all 18 achievements. This includes reuniting with my best friend, completing the troll minigame, lighting some candles, and a few more we'll touch on a bit later. Welcome to my full review. Fran Bow is a creepy psychological horror, story-focused, point-and-click adventure game created in 2015, being developed and published by Kill Monday Games. Before we start, this game is full of very disturbing images, themes, and flashing lights. I obviously won't try to show or go over anything too extreme, however, you've been fairly warned. Starting off with the settings, visually, I love the unique aesthetic and the old radio vibes it gives off. If we go back to the main menu, Fran's eyes will even follow your cursor, which is a nice creepy touch. Now the settings themselves are very simple, which is exactly what you should come to expect from a point-and-click adventure. Everything here is nicely separated and bold enough to stand out. Now VSync you'd assume would be on or off, however it goes into every V-blank, every second V-blank, or no VSync at all, which I obviously went with, but it's rare to see VSync get this technical. The controller sensitivity is a bit unexpected, especially for a point-and-click adventure. I learned after the fact it was ported to PS4 and Xbox One in 2023, 8 years later after release. So while Steam has no mention of controller support, you shouldn't have many problems using one, and the game is even Steam Deck verified. The one major flaw this page has is not allowing you to drag these dials. You can only change the settings by pressing the arrows on either side. As for the technical side of things, please note I'm running this off a low to high end PC, so how this performs for me might not perform the same for you. With that being said, I had little to no hardware related issues whatsoever. While a graphics card is required, you can get away playing this on anything with at least 500 megabytes of VRAM. Nothing too surprising, and the game was perfectly smooth the entire way through. The only problem this game has is a few random spelling errors. I won't show them as they're funny to come across, but there's a lot of text to read, so I won't deduct any points for it. As for the difficulty, there are no options. The difficulty of the game comes with its base gameplay, examining items, and solving many puzzles. While it's entirely story focused, it doesn't hold your hand in the slightest. You're given a quick tutorial, but past that, you're completely on your own. On the difficulty scale, I would give it a solid hard. While you can eventually figure some things out by just clicking around, there's a good handful of puzzles that require a lot of brain power and thinking outside of the box. As for its replayability, if you are extremely observant, you may not have to replay the game after your first completion. The only reason to replay would be for non-obvious achievements or dialogues you may have missed. There's also a chapter selection you can use after your first completion to replay any chapter you may have missed. Just keep in mind it will erase your autosave slot, so if you haven't manually saved prior, you'll lose everything. Clearly not speaking from experience. As for the gameplay, in short, Fran Bow is a creepy, point-and-click, story-focused adventure game where you play the main character named Fran, a young girl struggling with a mental disorder and the unfair destiny of witnessing the gruesome and mysterious death of her parents. Starting from the very beginning, the tutorial is quick and built right into the story with reading, dialogue choices, picking up your purse, taking pills, and passing right out. Once you awaken the beautifully decorated asylum, the game has truly begun and we must now figure out everything for ourselves. A mechanic that is not explained but is incredibly helpful is holding tab will show eyes on everything currently clickable within a room. Hotspots as they're called. I didn't figure this out until way later on, but on the bright side it's not required. The dialogue choices however are, and they can very rarely change your fate by making you miss an opportunity or two. A second replay is always an option, but you also don't miss out on too much except a few lore related snippets. The little purse you picked up previously is obviously your inventory, which has an infinite amount of space to hold any item you can find. You can then use those items within the world, combine them with other items, or examine them to get a brief description and closer look at certain items. The way combining works is a bit confusing. At first glance you'd expect to press or drag the item down to the combine button to, combine. However, you just drag any item on top of one another to combine them if you're allowed. My only other complaint here comes with this coin. It is the only stackable item in the game, so can you guess how many coins I have? That's right, I have 5. I could have said any number as there is no visual indication how many coins you have. That is unless you keep a mental note while obtaining them or examine the single coin to be told your count. This could have been an afterthought or just some old school nostalgic tech I don't recall. In that case I'd say it's fine, but overall this could have been a bit more telling. As I mentioned before, the puzzles of the game vary in difficulty. A majority of the puzzles come down to simply listening and going from one location to another, finding items to use in order to progress. With that being said, a lot lot of the context clues are not extremely obvious. Even with the hint systems, if you're not very observant, you'll hit walls where you'll feel incredibly stuck. The moment you're having to wander the worlds cluelessly trying different things in hopes it leads to some sort of progression is insanely unfun. I hate using guides, however I had to for a single puzzle as I just couldn't figure it out. The solution afterwards made a little sense, but the clues provided were horrible. The hint systems of the game come down to examining items, listening to what people have to say, and eventually your cat, Mr. Midnight, who you can talk to for clues on what you should be doing next. While these systems work nicely together, there are still times the hints provided aren't enough of a clue to point you in the right direction. It's not that big of a deal, but I can see many struggling if they've never played this sort of game before. Now, alongside the puzzles, there are a few unexpected minigames that take an entirely different approach. The maze minigame, for example, is obviously a maze, but instead of an oil-painted world, you're now in a 2D tabletop paper one, trying to make your way to the end without perishing to shadows. I won't spoil the others, but they all greatly change in art style and provide a new fresh experience outside of just clicking around. I thought all of them were a great addition. However, I disliked allowing players to skip them without completing the game first. They're clearly intended as they go along with the story, but they aren't that hard nor long enough to really complain about. So I don't recommend skipping them your first playthrough unless you're just that frustrated or dislike minigames, I suppose. Moving into the twisted world of Fran Bow. Visually, it's insanely unique with its distinct, creepily hand-drawn aesthetic. While it could be seen as a little outdated, it's just drawn in a way to resemble a painting, which I of course love. The worlds themselves are split up into the chapters, with each unlocking multiple new locations to explore deeper into your madness. Most of the worlds have a semi-clear path on where they want you to go, however getting there is usually the hard part. Almost every single location has its own twist of reality, which you can visit at any time by popping your thankfully infinite pills. If the normal location isn't creepy enough, this one will be right up your alley. I absolutely love how much the creepy worlds add to the environment, experience, and overall story. You will need to dance between the two anyway to solve puzzles among many other things. As for travel, you traverse the worlds by clicking where you want to go. Shocker, I know. However, certain locations will provide eyeballs on the sides of your screen, allowing for a quick teleport across that section. These are obviously incredibly helpful, but can also make travel a bit confusing, as some zones require you to travel where the eyes aren't provided. It's better than manually walking to each location, regardless of doing so out of habit anyway, but if you do it for some, you might as well do it for all just to keep the consistency. As for the audio, it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and they do an absolutely amazing job with it. I honestly can't think of a single complaint. There was never a hiccup, an out-of-place track, or a moment I wasn't immersed. The original soundtrack is completely filled to the brim with very dark and eerie tracks, fitting every single vibe it was trying to portray perfectly. I don't think anyone will have trouble becoming immersed, to say the least. Hey, you made it to the story section and my thoughts on it. I won't be covering the spoilers in depth, but if you'd like to avoid them, skip ahead to the positive and negative section below. Ready? Okay. You play as Fran Bow, a 10-year-old girl who struggles with mental illnesses after witnessing the murder of her parents. She is then found in the forest alone with her cat, and then admitted to an asylum, separating her from her only friend, Mr. Midnight. Under care, we are administered pills which cause hallucinations of a parallel universe full of blood, cryptic messages, gore, bodies, ghosts, and even an evil creature named Remor, who we can assume had a part in killing our parents. Which drives us to escape our imprisonment by finding our cat and simply going home. Throughout the game, you'll meet a lot of helpful and unique characters alongside constantly suffering with your psychological trauma and abuse. Now the story obviously goes a lot deeper than I described and is insanely creepy. If you're a fan of a psychological horror and haven't tried this yet, you will have a wonderful surprise. It doesn't rely on the jump scares you'd come to expect, however, heavily relies on the surrealism and unsettling imagery to get its point across, which of course it does perfectly. The story is told in multiple ways with its dialogue and cutscenes, to which you may not catch everything going on at first, or even after. While the base is made very clear, a lot of key points of the story don't make much sense unless you're thinking outside of the box or connecting very small dots. The ending, for example, can be taken in multiple different ways as it comes down to your interpretation. It just isn't fully explained to a close. Theory crafters will love this, but it makes for some confusing parts to us normal gamers. As for the dialogue, there aren't any options past A or B, which can be a good thing as you won't get too confused. However, pressing the wrong option can sometimes make you leave the conversation when you didn't mean to, which can sometimes make you lose out on important information. If it is not obvious, there's a lot of dialogue, and while trying to use an item on something you can't, Fran will talk back with attitude and even change your facial expression towards it. I found this to be an amusing little detail. Speaking of which, no dialogue in the game can be skipped even after your first completion. This makes the second playthrough a bit frustrating. However, you can skip every major cutscene and minigame, but not anything with dialogue. You could spam click through it, I guess, but anyway. As mentioned before, there are a total of 18 achievements, all of which took me 9 hours to obtain, with a single playthrough taking around 6. I will not be mentioning the ones handed to you just by playing, however, let's start with the more missable ones, such as I Found My Way Out, where you must simply beat the maze minigame. I talked about it before, but it's clear many players skip these, and I don't understand why. The Kind Thief is to return what you stole. This one has a pretty cute detail, however I never once thought to give it back without the achievement. Says a bit about me, I guess, huh? I Burn You is to simply burn the rope instead of cutting it. This one comes down to curiosity, and I'm glad there are achievements tied to that. Very nostalgic. Now the hardest achievement award will be going to the Old Story, which is to very simply find the picture behind the door. What door? Well, that's a great question. I had to search the entire game with a door in mind, only to find out it was the very last door you'll ever see, and behind it is this wonderful picture. Huh. Anyway, now let's go over some of the positives, such as the game is very polished. The unique hand-drawn aesthetic is absolutely beautiful, the overall audio and soundtrack is incredible, and there's a lot of disturbing yet meaningful themes. As for the negatives, some of the puzzles are insanely difficult, you can't skip already seen dialogue, and the ending is completely open for interpretation, which I was going to say is a neutral. However, it leans more towards the negative for me, as I would have preferred a proper ending here. In conclusion, Fran Bow is a creepy psychological point-and-click horror game, but would I recommend it? Well, Fran Bow is currently available for 17 Canadian doll hairs, or your regional equivalent on Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and any iOS storefronts. Now, while you honestly can't go wrong with its base price, the game is always going on sale, so waiting is absolutely worth it, especially if you're looking for a uniquely twisted point-and-click to add to your list. Huge thank you to Richulu for not only recommending it, but also helping me on the puzzles I sucked at. Fran Bow, 5 out of 6. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Let me know your thoughts down below, or what game you want to see me complete next. Subscribe so you never miss a video, and until next time, take care.